اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه بارك وسلم أما بعد.
Sir.
Well, so the time at our disposal is extremely limited, and I hope that, as expected, you are doing your studying on your own through the material, and are joining the class for a rehearsal of the major points relevant to the topics. Now, we had started to discuss the impediments to legal capacity, which we explained to be those factors that could reduce, remove, or alter legal capacity. Legal capacity, we mean the capacity of execution, which is vital for creating contracts, and not the capacity of assuming, which can never be altered or removed except through the death of the person. Well, so we briefly touched on some of the topics which are briefly mentioned in the course outline as well, such as insanity, imbecility, sleep, and unconsciousness. But the other topics are important, and you should know some details about the remaining types of impediments. We have discussed intoxication, how it affects legal capacity, and then imprudence or suff and its effect on legal capacity, and two more factors, which are bankruptcy or debt, and also death sickness. So we shall try to go through these very quickly, although we used to take more time on these in the class. But since it is supposed to be the flipped approach, so it will remain as such. Well, now intoxication. A person, we define it as a state where the brain is affected. A state where the brain is affected due to elements introduced, where the person loses the ability to judge between what is beneficial and harmful. I try to upload a screen, a share screen, which I prepared for some other purpose, which contains the essential aspects only, and which cannot be you cannot use it as your means of studying. Well, so well, now well, I hope you can see. Now, intoxication is an important topic because how intoxication affects legal capacity in Islamic law is rather different. So it is obvious that intoxication affects a person's mental capacities, and the ability to judge and think and to perceive. But despite of this, how Islamic law treats this is based on the fact that Islamic law prohibits voluntary willful intoxication. The person intoxicating himself willfully, voluntarily is prohibited in Islamic law completely. So based on this, a person who gets himself intoxicated is committing a violation of Islamic law, a violation of Sharia, and how it affects his legal capacity is judged on this basis. So due to this, yes, in Islamic law, we divide intoxication into two categories, and we consider it from two perspectives, based on the fact whether his intoxication was voluntary and willful, or he became intoxicated due to reason beyond his choice. So willful intoxication is where a person drinks or admits any intoxicating substance into his body voluntarily without being under compulsion or there being any compelling need. And the other type is where a person, due to reasons beyond his choice, becomes intoxicated, such as a person compels him under compulsion or due to by intake of intoxicating materials, substances by mistake, or sometimes there could be situations where even medications result in a state which is similar to intoxication. So Now, how Islamic law treats these two states and how legal capacity affected in these two states is that if the intoxication was involuntary, where the choice of the person played a limited role, or or did not play any role at all. So if it was involuntary intoxication, we categorize it as permissible intoxication, meaning it is tolerated in Sharia because the person did not commit any violation of Sharia in this form of intoxication. Now here, this intoxication affects the person's legal capacity, which means that his actions and utterances are now will not result in any legal effect. You see? Either contracts primarily will not result in legal effect if a person was in a state of intoxication, which is lawful or tolerated in Sharia by his becoming intoxicated in through a reason or through a manner which is beyond his choice. So here his utterances and acts are not recognized as valid, so contracts are not valid. But of course, if he causes loss to someone during a state of intoxication, now this has to be compensated because we know that bearing liability is a part of the capacity of assuming and not a part of capacity of execution, and the capacity of assuming is not affected under any circumstance. Well, the second type, which is willful intoxication, unlawful intoxication, where the person himself knowing fully well that by the intake of this substance he will become intoxicated and his brain will be affected, he will no longer be able to think clearly, and he may do or say things which are irrational and lawful. So knowing all this, he willfully puts himself in a state of intoxication and thereby violates the Sharia, violates the command of Sharia that he should not become intoxicated. So if he lowers his level of intelligence willfully by taking intoxicating substances, now in this case, his legal capacity is not reduced. He becomes responsible and his actions and utterances are valid, whether they are for him, in his favor, or against him. His actions and utterances are valid. He remains fully responsible for what he says or does in this state of intoxication because he himself put himself there and it was not under compulsion. So once he willingly made himself intoxicated, now he has to bear the consequences of what he says or does during intoxication, and his lower level of his intellectual capacity, because it was self-induced, is not recognized in Sharia. So he remains responsible for his actions and utterances, and it does not affect the capacity of the person when the intoxication was through illegal and unlawful means. Well, so look at the details. So we shall go to the next topic is imprudence. Imprudence or imprudence. Earlier, under Rushd, we talked about prudence. Prudence refers to good sense and sound judgment in property matters, as well as in not committing what is unlawful and illegal. So imprudence is referred to as saf, which is something that can affect the capacity of the person in the sense that his complete capacity of execution is not removed. His capacity of execution is not removed. But what happens is that he no longer is able to create property related contracts. Now, what is suffer or imprudence? Imprudence is negligence or carelessness is the negligence or carelessness due to which a person may waste away his property in ways which are not beneficial while remaining intelligent and without losing his intelligence. Intelligence remains with him, despite of which the state of imprudence induces a level of negligence in him where he becomes prone to wasting away his property. Now, this is called safq, and this can either accompany the person becoming an adult and obtaining full legal capacity, or it can affect the person later in life. So, if it remains with him while he becomes an adult, and that's where the guardian has to test whether he became prudent or not, and he shall hand over the property to him once he ascertains that he has attained prudence and imprudence is no longer with him. But if a person becomes imprudent later in life, after having been prudent, he became an adult with intelligence, he obtained full legal capacity, complete capacity of execution, and his prudence was proved. But after some time, he became imprudent again. He started to. Is anyone saying anything? Well, he started to waste away his property. Now, through a court ruling, he can be interdicted. He can be put under interdiction. Interdiction is where his transactional powers become curtailed and he is put under a guardian. So, when this is the case, now he is no longer able to create property related contracts, but the obligation to compensate remains because that is part of the capacity of assuming. And will it come to an end? If imprudence, as we said before, if it accompanied the person along with adulthood, then upon reaching 25 years in the Hanafi school, whether he, irrespective of whether he obtains prudence or not, the hajr or interdiction will come to an end. Whereas if it affects the person later in life, as long as it remains, he will be under guardianship. And this guardianship will be through a court ruling, and the former guardians will automatically not become the guardians once again when the person is affected with stuff. Well, so this is a summary of what imprudence is. The next topic, which is death sickness or death illness. By this we refer to a state that precedes the death of a person. A state which precedes the death of a person where some of his transactional powers are restricted, but it is not due to his intelligence being defective. Intelligence can remain fully functional, despite of which during the state of death sickness some of his transactional powers become curtailed. And the basis of the rules of death sickness in Islamic law is that inheritance, or how inheritance will be, his property will be divided among his inheritance, is preordained in Sharia. How his property is going to be distributed among his inheritors, this is something preordained in Sharia, where the person only has the right to part of his property after his death. As far as 2/3 of his property is concerned, they have to be, that portion has to be divided according to the prescription of the Sharia, according to the prescribed inheritors. So, before death sickness, the rules of before death, the rules of death sickness become applicable, so that he is not able to dispose of anything more than 1/3 of his property during this period. Well, how do we define this? We define death sickness as a state that incapacitates the person from his or her usual tasks and ends in death. It need not be a sickness necessarily. Any state that precedes the death where the person is uh, more or less certain that he is about to die, and then it ends in death, that period is termed as death sickness in Sharia. Well, now that period is termed as death sickness in the Sharia. Now, so a person can be sick, any severe sickness where he expects to die, where the possibility of recovering is remote, or any other state where people usually die and rarely are released and rarely escape death, such as, let's say, being caught up in a storm in a ship where the ship is about to sink. Okay? Or let's say being caught by an enemy who usually does not release his captives. You get caught to him and you die. Okay? So any such state where the person is fairly certain of his death, and then he practically ends, that state ends in death as well. So the period preceding his death will be categorized as a state of death sickness. Now, in this state, well, if he does not die, he comes close to death and is fairly certain that he is about to die, that he will never escape, but still he does not die and comes out of the state, is cured or released, or the storm subsides and he reaches land safely. So if that is the case, then that state was not death sickness, because a vital condition was not fulfilled, which is the state must end in death for it to be categorized as death sickness. Well, so in this state, what happens is that his ability to create contracts of gratuity, contracts of tabarru, where he gives anything for free to another person, gift, donation, work for any other thing. Now, this can be done out of 1/3 of his property only. He makes an immediate gift during the state of death sickness. He cannot gift away all his property. In normal days, when he's not in a state of death sickness, if he wishes, he could even give away all his property. It's not recommended, but still it is possible. But during the state of death sickness, he cannot do that. The maximum he can gift or donate or make the basis for any contract of gratuity is only 1/3 of his property. But 1/3 of his property means 1/3 of his estate, 1/3 of what he leaves behind after settling all dues. So the contract will be relevant and valid for 1/3 of his estate only, even in the case of immediate donations and immediate contracts having immediate legal effect. We know that a person can make a will or wasiya of 1/3 of his property. What is a will? Where he creates a contract, is apportioning or assigning a portion of his property to some person after his death, meaning after my death, so and so should be given so much. That is wasiya. So wasiya is always within 1/3. You cannot make a wasiya of more than 1/3 of your estate. But during death sickness, not wasiya, even normal donations, normal gifts, where he wants to give something to someone immediately, that too will be limited to 1/3 of his property. And also, in there could be indirect forms of gift as well, which we call muhabat. Muhabat refers to any any situation where in a contract of exchange, one party stands to make a gain or benefit, such as to sell your car, which the value of which is 30,000 ringgits, you sell it at 20,000 ringgits. You sell your car, the market value of which is 30,000 ringgits, you sell at 20,000 ringgits. So it is as if you had given that party to 10,000 ringgits. So in creating such contracts during death sickness, he can create those contracts of exchange. But this element of muhabat, or element of partiality or one-sided benefit, that too should be within 1/3 of his estate, because that comes as a form of gratuity contained and incorporated in this contract of exchange. Wait, so all forms of yes.
What is the gratuity?
Gratuity is something given for free.
So
That
not
will be
at a
something. It is something given for free. There can be various forms. Gratuitous contracts, gift is one, donation, you see, making a waqf. We discussed this, we touched on this before. So all of the contracts
Okay, thank
where
you.
you give something to another without taking anything, without in return, one party comes to own something without return, that is gratuitous contract. Contract, I think we touched on this when we discussed about using loan, the contract of loan as well. Well, so a person during normal days, he can give any amount to anyone. But during death sickness, his inheritors' rights have started to become relevant to his property. His property should go to his inheritors. He should not do any action depriving them of their just inheritance. Therefore, the Sharia has imposed this limit that during death sickness, where the person is expected to die and he knows that he is about to die, now he can dispose up to 1/3 of his property only through gratuitous means. Well, so look up the details. You should have read on this before the class, of course. Well, the next topic is bankruptcy or debt. We call debt as bankruptcy or debt. Well, remember, we are all of these are detailed topics. We are all just touching on how these can affect legal capacity in a basic manner. If not, there are a lot of details attached to these topics, because most of them are not confined to legal capacity only. Well, now, bankruptcy. What is bankruptcy? In Islamic law, when the mature debts of a person, I'll try to upload a slide. The mature debts of a person sorry. Okay. So the mature debts of a person go above his assets, or the due debts of a person go above his assets, his creditors can demand that he be put under interdiction and declared insolvent or bankrupt. So bankruptcy or insolvency refers to a situation where the total asset value of a person becomes less than the total value of his debts that have matured or become due. Become due means he has to settle them now, and his creditors can demand from him now. This means that the debts which are to mature in the future, where the creditors can demand in the future and they cannot demand now, they are not counted. The total due debts or mature debts, when the total of those debts go above the total value of all his assets, Now, this is called iflas or insolvency or bankruptcy. But remember, this does not make him bankrupt legally yet. He's not insolvent legally yet, and the rules of bankruptcy or insolvency will not affect him, and his legal capacity will not be curtailed until the creditors, when they become concerned that he cannot settle, they get a court ruling declaring him insolvent and declaring him bankrupt. At that point, the rules of bankruptcy will become applicable to him, not before. If the creditors are certain that this reliable person, although his assets are less than the total dues to us, still he managed somehow to settle to us. We can borrow and raise funds through some means and settle. So they are not concerned. They don't raise the issue and obtain a court ruling declaring him bankrupt. If they don't do that, the rules of bankruptcy will not affect him. But if they get a court ruling having proven the fact that his asset value is less than the total of debts due to him, now in this case he's declared bankrupt, and he will come under the rules of bankruptcy or iflas in Islamic law, which are detailed. We are not going to talk about the rules of bankruptcy, how shall his property be handled in Islamic law. His property will be liquidated, but still uh, giving him the choice to sell at the best price, and not make a loss in the process, and also leaving a portion of it for his expenses and his families. So you cannot make the family destitute. So taking the rights and the interest of all into consideration, liquidation will take place. So that is those are details related to bankruptcy which we shall not go into. Our purpose is to see how it affects his transactional powers. What happens when a person is declared bankrupt is that he will no longer be able to sell his property or gift his property, creating contracts of gratuity or creating contracts of the exchange, even such as sale. Now these are not possible because now the rights of the creditors have become attached to his property. Okay. Earlier, the rights of the creditors were attached to his zimma or his personal responsibility. They had no right to point at his car and say, sell this car and sell my day. They cannot say. They can just demand from him if he was not declared bankrupt. Now, after being declared bankrupt, now the rights of the creditors have, we say, become attached to his property in the sense that his property has now become similar to a mortgaged asset, which is frozen in legal terms, in the sense that he cannot legally transact in his own property despite of being the owner. So similarly, once a person is declared bankrupt, now he can no longer create contracts based on his property because now the rights of the creditors have become foremost and they should be settled first. And so he loses the power to create contracts. Now there are details attached to it. What sort of contracts are affected? What sort of contracts are not? Contracts of gratuity, all forms of gratuitous contract, gifts, donations, waqf, and even, so these contracts are affected. Now, and in the Shafi'i school, he cannot even create contracts of exchange. He cannot sell his property even at market value. His car is worth 30,000. Now he is selling at 30,000. Not possible unless under court supervision, because the rights of the creditors are attached. So under their supervision and under a court order, he can sell the property for fulfilling the rights of the creditors. But without that, in the Shafi'i school, on his own, he cannot create a contract of sale. In the Hanafi school, selling at par value is allowed. If he sells his property at the proper market value and not below, he may do so. But selling at below market value, meaning there's an element of muhabbat here, element of partiality here, in the sense that the buyer would stand to benefit. He is selling at less than market value, or he purchases something at more than market value, where the other party or the seller stands to benefit. There's an element of muhabbat there. So in the Hanafi school, if the contract includes element of muhabbat affecting their rights, in that case, such a contract would require the permission of the creditors. And there are a host of other contracts, lease and other forms, and about how bankruptcy affects. There are details. Well, so we shall stop with this short summary of these topics. You had to go through your material, Mohammed Zuhaili and others, and obtain the necessary details, because these are topics that you should know in detail. Well, so thank you very much for your presence. So we shall meet again and start to discuss about legal authority and
Excuse me,
subject
doctor.
in our class on Wednesday.
Excuse me, doctor.
Yes.
Yeah, for our midterm test, which chapters we have to study? We have to study first 3 chapters, I suppose, the first 3 chapters.
No, the midterm test will be, well, until the end of what we discussed today. Meaning end of legal impediments.
Legal capacity.
Legal capacity plus impediments.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Make sure that you go through this, and hopefully, inshallah, all of you will do well. Yes, anything else?
Is it in multiple choice form or written form?
I'm considering what you suggested, meaning some multiple choice questions and some essay type questions.
Essay.
It's comprised of both MCQ as well as essay type. That's what I'm thinking of now, and hopefully it should be like that.
Okay.
Is it open book test or?
Up to you. You can keep the book open or closed. I can't see you.
Okay, sir.
So, but we'll concentrate on problem-based questions. It will do well if you study hard beforehand, because there won't be much you can take straight away from the book.
Sir? Sir?
Yes, I can hear you.
I did some problem questions and I sent it to your email. So if you can check it.
Who is talking?
Sorry?
Who is talking?
Shuruq.
Yes, I saw your answers. They were not problem-based. You had just answered some very theory questions, and those answers must be much more detailed. You will not get a lot of marks if you answer in short form like that. So
okay.
It will be much more detailed, and they were not problem-based questions. As far as I saw, you had answered the first few questions.
Just the tutorial ones.
Sorry,
Thank you.
So thank you very much for the effort. They're very good. So very good.
Send us the slides today.
Thank you so much.
Send the slides to us.
Thank you very much.
Send the slides to us.
Well, thanks a lot. Good day to you, and I wish you the best. And let's meet on Wednesday, inshallah. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Salam. Bye.